Hello and welcome to my channel, or welcome back to my channel. I hope everyone is doing well. Today I am going to be reading you a story from the True Crime Stories book, True Crime Anthology Volume 8. If I pronounce anything wrong, I do apologize. The serial killer journalist Vlado Taneski. During the mid-2000s, in the small southeastern European county of Macedonia, a well-respected reporter decided to bring his own brand of fake news to his country. But instead of plagiarizing someone else's work or making up a source here and there, Vlado Taneski went on a killing spree and then wrote about it. Taneski's venture into serial killing helped to boost his readership, but the reporter's true motive to kill may have been the result of his mysterious past. Taneski was born in 1952 in the country that is now known as the Republic of Macedonia, but was at that time part of communist Yugoslavia. Although the name Macedonia may conjure visions of ancient Greece's glorious past, the people and region have much more in common with their Slavic Serbian neighbors than they do with the Greeks. Taneski's family was poor, but like most other Slavs living behind the Iron Curtain at the time, they took their poverty in stride and with a stoic nature, and things could have been worse for the Taneski family. Although Yugoslavia was a communist nation, it was not part of the Warsaw Pact, and was actually much more open and freer than the other Eastern European communist countries. Yugoslavia's economy was also more stable than its neighbors, so therefore its people had more opportunities. Vlado was given several opportunities as a youngster, which is when he learned that he had an aptitude for writing. By all accounts, his father nurtured Vlado's interests, but his mother remained aloof. Miss Taneski's was a house cleaner who worked long hours and often saw very little of her family. Vlado spent much more time with his father than he did with his mother. Vlado began to resent his mother at an early age, and after his father died in 1990, his resentment turned to pure hatred. After graduating from high school, Taneski married, had 2 children, and began a successful career as a journalist. During his 20 years as a journalist, Taneski covered a wide variety of stories throughout Macedonia. But the one that made his career was the series he wrote about the butcher of Kicevo. Taneski's colleagues were impressed with the scope and depth of the series and its catchy writing style. Little did they know that Taneski was making his own scoops through murder. No one knows why Vlado Taneski began killing, or even if the murders now positively attributed to him are his only murders, but problems in his personal life seem to have at least been the catalyst. Not long before Taneski's first known kill, he and his wife separated. Some postulate that the separation was what drove him to kill, while others believe that he had the urge for some time and that being separated from his family simply gave him the freedom to do so. Whatever the reasons, Macedonian authorities believe that Taneski's killing spree of innocent Baba is the Macedonian word for grandmother, began at least as early as 2003, when 78-year-old Gorica Pavleska disappeared near her home in the town of Kicevo. Although Kicevo has had its share of ethnic problems that have been between the Orthodox Christian ethnic Macedonians, Muslim Albanians, and Romani Gypsies, its crime rate is fairly low and mostly the result of thefts and petty crimes. A missing woman was something of concern for the authorities, but they had nothing to work with. There were no witnesses or physical evidence left behind. For all they knew, the elderly cleaning lady decided to move to the capital city of Skopje. The case was quickly forgotten, and the people of Kicevo got back to their daily routines. After kidnapping and killing Gorica Pavleska, Taneski did not kill again for 2 years. It appears that since he got away with the first murder and was never a suspect, he became bolder, leaving the bodies of his next 3 victims for the authorities to find. In 2005, the disappearance of Gorica Pavleska was a distant memory in the minds of the Kicevo police, but more than a few officers were reminded of the case when they discovered the body of 64-year-old Mitra Sajanska. It was immediately clear that she had been murdered. Her body was wrapped in plastic bags and was bound by telephone cords. An examination by a coroner revealed that Zajanskova had been beaten, strangled, and raped, although they could not determine if the rape was post-mortem. The police released the name of the murdered woman to the media and the fact that she had been murdered, but withheld other details, such as her being bound with telephone cords. Serial killers are not very common in southeastern Europe, so the Macedonian authorities were forced to look outside their country for tactics to catch the butcher of Kicevo. Although the Macedonian authorities may have been underfunded and somewhat ill-equipped to deal with a serial killer stalking their country, they used sound police techniques during their investigation of the murders of the Babas in Kicevo. They dutifully collected all the physical evidence from the location where Zajonska's body was found and quickly determined that she was murdered at another location and then dumped for the police to find. A working psychological profile of the killer was then formulated based on the victim, who was an elderly house cleaner. Finally, semen samples were taken from Zajanska's body that would prove to be vital in the later stages of the investigation. As the days turned to weeks and the weeks turned to months and then years, the murder of Mitra was largely forgotten by the Macedonian public. But then another dead Baba turned up in February 2007. The corpse of 56-year-old Ljubuka Lakoska was discovered in a public area bound with telephone cords and wrapped in plastic bags. The autopsy revealed that Lakoska had been beaten, strangled, and raped. The Macedonian police immediately recognized the method of operation and the signature as virtually the same as the Zajanska murder 2 years earlier. It became frightfully clear that there was a serial killer operating in the sleepy country of Macedonia. The news of the connection between the Zajonska and Lakoska murders frightened the people of Macedonia, but proved to be a boon to the career of a freelance journalist named Vlado Taneski. Before the murders, Taneski was a successful journalist, but not known very well outside the Macedonia crime beat for which he usually reported. Taneski was the vanguard of the Kicevo murder story, and to many he had an almost uncanny way of getting the story and many important details before any other reporter. Little did they know. As the people of Macedonia grew restless over the fact that there was a crazed killer operating in their midst, seemingly with impunity, the restlessness turned to outright fear when the body of another Baba was found in May 2008. 65-year-old Zavania Temelkoska was a friendly house cleaner who had no known enemies or problems with anyone, which made her brutal murder difficult for those who knew her, difficult to accept. Like Zajonska and Lakoska, Temelkoska's body was discovered in a public space bound with telephone cords and wrapped in plastic. Also, like the other women, she had been beaten, strangled, and raped. The Macedonian authorities were now certain that they had a serial killer on their hands. The tiny Slavic nation was in turmoil as the news of the latest murder was released to the public, who were sure that the murders were connected. The authorities were more than sure that there was only one butcher of Kicevo, but they wisely kept many of the details of the murders from the media, which is how they captured Taneski. As the body count of Babas piled up in Kicevo, freelance crime reporter Vlado Taneski was there every step of the way. Of course, Taneski was the killer in question, but no one who knew him would have thought so until he began publishing his series of articles about the butcher of Kicevo. Perhaps in any other situation, Taneski's articles would have been overlooked, but since Macedonia is such a small country, and the spate of serial killings was such a big story, nearly everyone in the country was reading his work. One would think that Taneski would have been more careful about what he wrote, but hubris seemed to have grabbed hold of the reporter. He got away with killing all those women. Why would he get caught for reporting about it? Taneski probably believed that the Macedonian police were little more than country rubes, and that there was no way they could capture a criminal as intelligent and sophisticated as him, right? The reality is that Taneski made more pretty amateur mistakes during his reign of terror in the tiny Slavic nation. The first and perhaps biggest mistake he made was not reporting on the murders, but reporting information that the police withheld from the press, specifically in his articles. Taneski claimed that the murders must be connected because all the victims were bound with telephone cords. The police never released that information to the public. Once the authorities learned of this interesting turn in the case, they began to focus on Taneski as their primary suspect. The police knew that only they and the killer knew about the telephone cord bindings, so he must be their man. Despite the realization, Macedonia in 2008 was a very different place than it was when it was part of Yugoslavia. Gone were the authoritarian tactics that police could employ under communism. They could no longer do mass detainments of men or kick down doors without warrants. More evidence was needed before they could arrest Taneski. The investigators next did a background check on Taneski and learned that his deceased mother was a house cleaner who bore physical similarities to the victim. They also learned that he had a deep hatred for his mother. The information was enough to get a warrant for a DNA sample from Taneski, which revealed his costliest mistake. Taneski's DNA profile proved to be a match with the semen taken from 3 of the murdered women. Vlado Taneski was arrested for murder on June 22, 2008. Taneski's arrest became an immediate media sensation, not just in Macedonia but throughout all the former Yugoslav nations. His picture was flashed continually across television screens, but he was not what people expected. Taneski was a seemingly normal family man who was not an ugly or scary-looking guy. People were most perplexed at how Taneski was making his own murder scoops. The people of Macedonia quickly learned that serial killers come from all backgrounds. If Taneski had been arrested in the United States, or most Western countries for that matter, he probably would have been placed in isolation for his and the other inmates' safety. Jails are full of violent people, many who are headed to state prisons to serve lengthy sentences, who would like nothing better than solidify their reputation as tough guys by killing or injuring a serial killer. On the other hand, serial killers are obviously inherently violent individuals who would strike out at other inmates at any time. Apparently, the Macedonian correction system does not follow the same penile philosophy. Taneski was placed in a general population cell with 2 other inmates. Taneski was found drowned to death headfirst in a bucket of water the next morning. The police ruled the death a suicide and the case was closed, but many think that Taneski's cellmates gave the serial killer a taste of Eastern European justice with the guards' blessings. No formal investigation was conducted into Taneski's death. Despite happening over 10 years ago, the wounds that Vlado Taneski inflicted on Macedonia are still raw for many. The people of Macedonia, especially those who personally knew Taneski, struggle with trying to understand how a seemingly nice, successful man could so ruthlessly kill old women in his free time. Perhaps this sentiment is best summed up by Ognen Kanvarak, who worked with Taneski. He was a nice and educated guy who seemed completely normal. Kanvarak said, "When the police rang me to say your reporter is a murderer, I couldn't barely believe my ears. People still have a difficult time believing a reporter killed people for the scoop." Thank you for listening. If you like this type of content, please consider subscribing and liking my channel, and I will see you on the next one.